I'm Sarah Gloss, and welcome to this week's episode of A Bro's Guide to Glitter. We're going to be talking about Disney princesses. We're going to ask ourselves, what even is a Disney princess? What makes them different from other female protagonists? How have the characters evolved over time? And how do princesses become both empowered and diminished in their own stories? Today's guest is a Renaissance man and absolute Disney fanatic. He's a senior at Cal Poly SLO studying civil engineering with a theater minor. He's booked and busy with marching band, improv, sketch comedy, theater, theme park design, and being the host of the podcast Canned Culture, of which I had the honor of being a guest on during its first season. Please meet D'Angelo Reyes.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Sarah. This is exciting.
Thank you so much for being here. Very excited to have you. So, you are a major Disney fan. Everyone knows this about you. Tell us how your relationship with Disney got started.
Oh, absolutely. We've been seeing each other on and off again for 5 years. I think it's going steady. No. Yeah, so I grew up in NorCal where we're from there. And I lived in SoCal for like a little bit of my life when I was very, very young. Very young. Um and I would just my parents would take me to Disneyland literally so much when I was that age. So I kind of grew up with the parks first and sort of the movies sprung out from that kind of by association. Um, and I would just watch the movies a lot as well. Like I grew up with the 90s Renaissance films. All of those were sort of constantly replayed in my house and to me on VHS and DVD. So I just grew up watching them a lot and I kind of had my love for it like a lot of people do. And I take the Disney adult title to heart. I'm very, very proud of my title and being not as obnoxious as possible
Yes.
with how much I like the fandom. But
I don't
that's
understand
what I would say.
shit on Disney adults.
Yeah, I it's fun and like don't hate people for liking things that that it's not hurting
Yeah,
anybody as long as
exactly.
people aren't toxic.
Exactly. Well, and the other night I made at the Grand Floridian in Walt Disney World, they have giant Mickey Mouse shaped cookies dipped in chocolate. And on TikTok, I found the recipe and I made like 6 giant cookies. And, when you're alone in your college apartment, sometimes you just have to act out that Disney adult life.
That sounds super, super good. Oh my god. I mean, yeah, I literally went to Disneyland like a month ago, which was super
Yes.
fun. And I just kind of had a great time. I was like 5 years old. It was great because I went with a bunch of college improv friends of mine and got to go to Star Wars Land, Rise of the Resistance. Got to ride that for the first time.
Yes. So good.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna go back eventually. Gotta get my little magic key pass since they got rid of annual passes.
Yeah, that's rude. But it's
Rude.
cool then to be all like, I still have the annual pass bumper sticker, and I'm able to be like, oh, vintage.
I'm vintage. I still carry around my old annual pass card. I always show it off to be like, look at this historical artifact from like 2 years ago. You know?
And so you're a really big rides guy. Not just, I mean,
Absolutely.
obviously people who go to the parks enjoy the rides, but you are into the mechanics and the design and the marketability of it. So tell us about your relationship to that.
Yeah, no, I went into Cal Poly where I'm going to school right now for civil engineering. Just as a sort of, oh, okay, engineering is cool. That's my favorite one. Let me figure out what I want to do. I ended up getting into a theme park club that we have on campus, and that was a fantastic gateway to sort of push me into a career path that I genuinely want to go into, which is theme entertainment, which is that world. Um, there's a big community and like I said, industry of people that work on that stuff. Sort of, there's Disney and Universal, but then there's so many other smaller companies that
Hmm.
specialize in so many different things, whether that be like mechanical engineering with robots, or scenic design and just like fabrication, or even creative writing and producing and talent casting. There's a huge, beautiful mix between technical things and creative things that I personally vibe with a lot. So it's one of my career goals, at least, to get into that world. And I have been involved recently, but um, it's been something I've been eyeing over the past few years as a viable option for me after school. And we love
Yeah.
thinking about, oh, what are your plans after college? And I'm like, don't ask me yet. But um, I've been thankful I've been able to have a sort of answer what I want to do after I graduate. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's very, very cool.
Yeah. And how cool is it? Because I mean, I think that like with creative stuff, it's hard to like say, I want to pursue this specific creative career and have there be like a rational, tangible thing. Because even if you think about like the two big things I think about, I can imagine, high school Sarah being like, oh, I want to be on Broadway or I want to be a film director. But, you get to college and you realize it's not so simple as saying, I want to be a film director. It's not so simple as saying, I want to be on Broadway. Not everyone in those like majors industries like do that job, but then you're at a level where you know exactly what is out there and you can see it and you can to be able to say yes, I know exactly what exists creatively and mechanically
Oh,
for this.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, like, even for me, it was like, oh my God, I want to be an Imagineer. Wow. But it's
Yeah.
like, there's so much more you can do as well. And like jobs sort of in a similar sort of way to, like, I would even say theater, because they're kind of molded out of the same forms.
Yeah.
Very that sort of theme park careers, they're very project. They're all projects. So you can bounce around from different companies for so much, for so long. Yeah, even people at Disney, they don't ever really stay for that long. You'll like say you'll work on Epcot in like 1982, and then you'll be fired. And like, oh, okay, now where do I go? Either you stay
Mm,
and wait for the next big project, or find ways to grow yourself as a person, and maybe even some people start their own companies with if they have money. Some people go work for other places. There's a lot of options to do in that sort of, again, project less secure kind of way, which at least is honestly I'm passionate enough so where I think that's a viable option for me.
yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So, what do you think was the first princess movie you watched?
Oh
Or the first one
gosh.
you can remember watching?
Honestly, I say this answer a lot whenever I think about it, but it's always Beauty and the Beast. It's my favorite Disney movie.
Yeah.
But that's when I grew up with, when like I think that the earliest memory I had of it was probably when I was like 2 or 3. I just remember it was that movie I would constantly rewatch with my aunt, who also loves Disney movies. And I
Yeah.
had these little like plushies of Lumiere and Cogsworth. I just remember
Oh,
that. I remember those two that I would like I had in my room. But that movie is the one I watched constantly, and then maybe a little bit of Little Mermaid, and then like Lion King, Aladdin, those 90s movies I would watch on
yeah.
repeat forever and ever and ever.
Mhm. Yeah, the Renaissance. Definitely when we were like 10 or like however old we were and Princess and the Frog came out, I was like, "What? They still make Disney movies?" I thought they stopped making Disney movies after the Renaissance.
Yeah, that was that lull in there. Like, since we grew up in like the early 2000s, it's that like
Yeah,
lull of movies where it was like, oh, Chicken Little, which I did watch,
I
and
love Chicken
it's like
Little.
a guilty pleasure movie for me because it's like kind of bad, but it's I grew up with it, so it's like I got nostalgia. But it was like you weren't seeing any of the hand drawn like epic musical movies that they used to have,
Yeah,
like kind of after, say, like Hunchback or even Tarzan to an extent. But
yeah. It was the Pixar era.
yeah, exactly. Which I mean, which is why Pixar is so like in zeitgeist still because everyone who grew up with them now is like our age or a little older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if Beauty and the Beast was your favorite movie, does that mean Belle's your favorite princess?
I did make a presentation once saying that. I would say not necessarily. I love her journey as a character a lot.
Hmm.
It's one of my favorites, and I mean, it is my favorite movie. So it's like I would say her journey is. I wouldn't say her journey is my like number one favorite, but her journey as a character is like super compelling to me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you were watching that with your aunt, did was there like did your parents, family member, did anyone tell you, "Oh, this is for girls?" Or was it more general, like this is for everyone?
Honestly, definitely with the nature of Disney at the time, I think, and sort of where I was as a child, I think it's very just, for the whole family, everyone can watch it. And yeah, I never really thought about it in this sort of gender specific kind of way. And I don't think I ever would have until like schooling and other children happened, you
Hmm.
know? Because like
Hmm.
you learn in sort of a weird implicit way, especially around other children because they learn their stuff from their own parents and and everyone's
Yeah.
different. It's like you end up learning that via all those social constructs via maybe association where it's like, oh, um, I like Disney. Everyone loves Disney, but it's like, do you only watch the princess movies? Oh, those are for girls. And it's like you kind of learn that, like I said,
Yeah.
implicitly. So you end up like kind of shying away from it as you sort of grow older. Um, which I didn't really do that, but I definitely the more I think about it and analyze it, like I can see that pretty much happened because it's like I never really stopped watching the movies because they were gendered off, but it was like I would just say, "Hey, I'm a Disney fan," and then that could kind of go from there. So I don't
Mm.
know, but it's a very interesting sort of dynamic that you get from societal and like school, and I wouldn't say school, but like pressure from people growing up that age when you're learning all that stuff like and navigating that as a person and like navigating social circles and whatnot.
Yeah, certainly like what other people tell you to like,
Yeah,
you're going to watch. People told me I would like The Office or like that The Office was famous, therefore I watched The Office. And so then that's happening, but when you're like 3 and 4 at like a gendered level.
yeah, it's very convoluted and odd and yikes. I'll say to at least to that. It's like let people
Yeah.
watch what they want to watch. It's like not that big of a deal.
Yeah, yeah. And also when you think about like, well then what's the flip side to Disney princesses? Obviously Pixar isn't only for boys. Pixar is for everyone, but certainly it is true that a lot of those early Pixar movies all had male protagonists. So, without the princesses, you know, leading in female protagonist representation, then you're going to get a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, it's that kind of classic sort of Hollywood misogyny. Wow, so quirky. It's basically just Hollywood misogyny where it's like you can have a male protagonist led film and
Mhm.
have it be marketable to like everybody and like
Yeah.
again to families. But then we
Mhm.
look closely, and thankfully this is a trend that's only kind of starting to be noticed now. But like we had to get there somehow. But
Yeah.
you in the past you always see that those female protagonist led films are always again boxed in to as like their specific gendered thing. And it's never been like a really focused on the whole as itself rather than who the protagonist is. And it's different for all movies, but like specifically
Yeah.
with Disney movies, you can tell that in like quote unquote children movies. It's like, oh, so the girl led movie has to be for girls, but then like why can't everyone watch it? It's
Yeah.
odd.
Well, and it's interesting because I read something recently that talked about how Disney has been titling its new Disney princess movies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because with Princess and the Frog, the box office sales didn't do too well, which is ridiculous because Princess and the Frog, if you haven't watched Princess and the Frog, you are doing yourself a disservice.
That
It
movie's
is
iconic.
a phenomenal movie. It is amazing. It's funny. It's thrilling. It has amazing music. As to why the box office isn't good, honestly, I think it's fucked up stuff about America.
I do have an answer, sort of. And I think
Okay.
it's a mixture of a lot of things. Do you mind if I go into that?
Sure.
Yeah, my answer for that, which I've done some research on it before because
Hmm.
I'm that person. But
Hmm.
I think a lot of because it was around 2009 and that was again Pixar. It was Pixar domination and Disney was
Oh, hmm.
internal strife with like that and their own animation studio was like sunk at that point with the comparison to Pixar making all the money. So they were up with competing as 2D animation was already sort of a falling out in popularity, at least with Disney. Like 2D
Hmm.
animation is still around, but it's like Disney wasn't really getting any hits out of it, and
Yeah,
it was that on top of maybe
that's a good point.
racial bias, maybe which I'm sure
Yeah.
played into it. On top of uh, also just poor marketing because they didn't really market it at all. They barely marketed the movie at that time.
Really?
Yeah, it was like how much they market the movies nowadays. They barely did that for Princess and the Frog,
Oh.
and like that again, that sort of dynamic shift to not I wouldn't even say dynamic shift, but that um what's the word called for like a group of people like demographic. It's that
Mm,
demographic shift too. I think when it came
mm.
to the CG films of Pixar were family movies, but then the 2D animated Disney films were kids movies. You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting.
So at least for me,
That
that
makes
whole mixture of things led to it underperforming, which then is a domino effect for them switching to CG. And now look, Empire.
That's interesting. And because what I had found, which I'm sure all of that were contributing factors, but I found another, maybe it wasn't a contributing factor, but Disney believed it was a contributing factor, was the fact that it was named Princess and the Frog.
Yeah,
And the idea that princess being in the title would deter boys. And that's why they did Tangled, and that performed way better. And so they thought the idea was that it had a gender neutral title. And so then with Brave, it's Brave. And then Frozen, they didn't say the Ice Queen, they said Frozen. And Moana is like obviously a girl's name, but it means the ocean. And so with like the next three three Disney princess movies, they changed the title to something that was like one word and didn't note gender.
and what's funny is that's been a trend since then, and I think it's super funny because it's like Coco is for Pixar, and then Encanto's coming out soon, and that's another one-word title with a female protagonist. So you can kind of see that evolution, which I think is fascinating to observe.
Yeah. Which I mean, certainly it's easier to say the shorter titles. I mean, we don't say The Adventure of Snow White. I mean, I'm not even sure that's the full title, but like
Snow White and the
if
Seven Dwarfs.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There we go. I don't say Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I just say, I think I said dwarves. But I just say
Dwarfs? Is it dwarves?
it's dwarves. But I
Dwarf.
said drawers, dwarves, dwarves. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves? Dwarves.
Dwarves. I like dwarves.
Dwarves.
Let's go gnomes.
Gnomes, Snow White and the Seven Gnomes.
Yeah, you just say
So,
Snow White.
yeah, just say Snow White. Because I mean, like, and when we were little, we watched Great Mouse Detective, and my brother didn't, like, my brother, before, this was like while my brother was learning to speak, he loved it, but he couldn't say the Great Mouse Detective.
That's funny.
So he called it Gift-a-Fifth,
Ah, that's cute.
which, like, doesn't sound anything like it, of course. But like weirdly, I knew what Gift of Fifth was,
Yeah.
and I was like 7 or 8, but I didn't say The Great Mouse Detective either. And even though I could speak, I didn't know. And so Joe was like, I want to watch Gift of Fifth. I want to watch Gift of Fifth. And my parents were like, what? What? And I was kind of like, yeah. You know that
That one.
movie?
With the
That like,
clock and the mice.
yeah, but I didn't even say with the clock and the mice. I just said like, oh, it has like a lot of blue in it. And my parents were like, what?
I love how this movie transcended your own reality of social constructs and natures of names. That's hilarious.
It did. It really did. All right, so let's play a word association game. I'm going to put 15 seconds on the clock, and in those 15 seconds, you are going to say every word that comes into your head when you think of Disney princesses. Go.
Loyalty, bravery, courage, kindness, beauty, magic, royalty. I said it again. Singing, birds, dresses, fighting, fierce, girl boss.
Go, boss. So, well done. Beauty, dresses, royalty, girl boss. Very well said.
Right? Yeah. Let's go.
Can't wait for my Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss episode of this
I will.
podcast.
I would like to come back for that. I have many, many more opinions about that.
Perfect. You'll be our expert.
Excellent. I can be also the expert on mansplain, manifest, and manslaughter.
Is it because I heard mansplain, manipulate, male wife.
I think that's what it actually is. I've also heard mansplain, manipulate, manifest.
Ooh, manifest.
And I threw in manslaughter because it sounded funny.
That does sound funny. That does sound funny. So, let's settle once and for all. What is a Disney princess? Because Disney has an official Disney princess franchise. And this list is what they use for the lunch boxes, the Band-Aid boxes, the photo ops, the parades. They have this official Disney princess website, and they have their official grouping list. So this current list is Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, Moana, Raya, and Elsa and Anna are Disney princesses, but because Frozen was so popular, they are their own franchise. So there's separate Frozen lunchboxes and Frozen Band-Aids. So knowing that that's the official list. Also, there are 3 women I should mention who used to be on the list but got kicked off. So Giselle from Enchanted used to be on the list, but either Disney in their contract with Amy Adams didn't pay for her likeness, or Amy Adams was like, no, you have to pay me more to use my likeness. And they were like, no, we don't want to pay you more. And then Tinkerbell was a Disney princess, but they removed her to make the Pixie Hollow franchise with her and her fairy friends. And then there was Esmeralda from Hunchback of Notre Dame, but her product sales didn't do as well. And because in her movie, she's basically lusted after by a priest.
Yep.
So Disney was like, she represents mature themes.
Out of here. Sorry.
Too bad. As someone who played Frollo on stage, D'Angelo, do you feel responsible for this loss?
I do, and I take accountability for this. I am the problem. I am part of the problem, and I strive to be better. Thank you.
Thank you for the acknowledgement. Hashtag girl boss.
Hashtag cancel Frollo.
So now this is where it gets hard, is with the idea of like unofficial Disney princesses.
Yeah.
So, there's Wendy from Peter Pan, Maid Marian from Robin Hood, Jessie from Toy Story, Leia from Star Wars. What's your opinion on that, like, unofficial Disney princess list being a thing?
Yeah, that's sort of interesting to think about because like you have the distinction between like legitimate princess as like a royal title, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus just the female protagonist of a Disney film, you know, where it's like by association, a character could be a princess, but then you end up lumping in other characters like say Alice or Wendy, who are just like not princesses, but they happen to kind of be associated with them because they're also female characters. It kind of there's a lot of weird like I guess what's the word like it's odd. It's you can't
Yeah.
really you know what I'm saying?
Because at what point is it like, okay, is she really a princess or is she
Yeah.
just a girl?
She's just a girl, but it's like there's like an outlet there to be under the title of Disney princess, but then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, then why can't we just have them as a protagonist? And um, I know there's a really odd set of guidelines
Yeah.
that Disney has for their, at least for their brand, because they're
Yeah.
like it's very very specific and it's very strange.
Yeah. And technically, our good friend Trevor Chan, who was on last week's episode talking about Barbie movies,
Oh, love
uh,
him.
he pointed out to us that someone who technically fits under the realms of being a Disney princess is Remy the Rat
Yes,
from
that's right.
Ratatouille.
That is correct. He is the child of royalty.
He is the
And
child of Django the Rat King.
so I think Remy the Rat is the greatest Disney princess of all. You know, that
Mhm.
journey, that culinary journey, amazing.
That character arc. Yeah, and because certainly with the idea that Disney, like, oh, she's a female protagonist, therefore she's a Disney princess. I mean, it can be kind of sweet, like, oh, she did so well, she's a princess. You don't need to have a crown to be a princess. But it could also, on the flip side, suggest that like female protagonists can't exist without that princess classification, without the like protection of that.
Royal, literally patriarchy.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy.
And because also, at what point are there just like a bunch of monarchs and female leaders in movies?
Yeah, I mean, you see that with like, I know I say girl boss as a joke, but like the girl
Mm-hmm.
boss character that kind of pops up every now and then, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I want to be the new king, and it's like, okay, cool, sure.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know, it's weird.
Judy Hopps. Is Judy Hopps a Disney princess?
Judy Hopps is her own thing. You know what I'm
Oh,
talking about? The
yes.
Zootopia characters are their own thing.
I
They're
keep forgetting
furries.
that Disney made Zootopia.
I saw Nick Wilde at Disneyland recently. It was a
Oh,
lot to
so
process.
the fact that Disney lets themselves, okay, so when they made Zootopia, they were like, oh, we're making a cute little animal movie. It's all an allegory for racism. Like, good
Oh,
idea,
cute.
good idea. And but now that it's been turned into a furry thing with Nick Wilde, Judy Hopps,
Like
uh,
thirst things. It's so odd.
thirst things, the abortion comic.
Oh
Dare we
God,
mention
yeah.
the forbidden Tumblr meme of 2019?
Ew, no, 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 no.
Disney just keeps letting this Nick Wilde character into Grand California Adventure
Yeah.
like nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening. There's nothing to see here.
Oh my god. So, obviously, Judy Hopps is a recent Disney character. And, princesses have changed over time. Let's talk about some of those big differences between, Snow White all the way up to Raya.
Oh, yay. History time. I love it.
History time. So, like, the first big thing to talk about is how the princes have changed.
Mm.
Because, I mean, you start with Snow White, and there's Prince Florian. That's his
That's his
name.
name, Florian? Yeah, that's right.
Yes, that's his name, Prince Florian. Kind of a dumb name, in my honest opinion. I would not name my child that. But, it was medieval Germany, I believe. So
Yeah.
I'll let it
How
slide.
old is he in that movie, too? Is he like 18 or like 20?
I have no clue. Let's look it
Because
up.
all
Because I
I know
know,
is that the age gap is upsetting because she's like 14.
yeah, she's 14. He's 31?
Oh, Jesus.
Jesus.
The
That's
live reaction.
insane.
You have to keep that in. That's so good.
That's a 17-year-old age gap.
Oh, God. He could be her
Oh
father.
my God. He could, especially in that time, and because that they're going to get married and then they're going to bang instantly. If she's 14,
Oh,
oh my God. Oh my God.
I
Anyway,
hate that.
this
Thanks.
is
I
a
hate it.
family podcast.
Oh,
Actually,
no.
I don't even know if it is. I just forward it to my family.
Oh, Lord
Uh,
Almighty.
and now I have this whole thing open, this whole link open saying the age gaps between people.
Yeah, I see this. See
Apparently
this
in
website.
in Hercules is 18 and Meg is 28.
Oh. Rawr.
And then
Oh,
Shifty
Lord.
Beauty is 19, Colette is 26. Good for him.
All right. All right.
Interesting. And then you get more normal age gaps.
Well, you know what's fascinating, though? The the 14 Snow White thing is very like that's very 1930s. Like,
Yes,
you know what I mean though? It's very 30s.
yes, yeah. Very 1930s to just like say, yeah, she's 14 and therefore she's at her most beautiful and pure. And then this fully adult man comes to take her away.
Oi, oi, mama. Oh no. Oh no. Makes a good ride though.
Makes a great ride. Great history.
What's interesting too, at least for Snow White, since we'll talk about Snow White for a little bit, but
Yeah,
I still find Snow White compelling, and maybe that's the combination of it being the first movie and like just
me
the
too.
artistry behind the movie, but
Yeah,
also like that's I give a lot of not uh, slack. That's the word. I give a lot of like slack to Snow White's story only because I think it's pure like utter fan. Like it's one of the movies that leans the hardest into the pure like fairy tale fantasy aspect of it. And they don't talk about their ages in the movie. They don't really go over that. And like the prince is only in it in the beginning and the end. So it's like
yeah,
they never really talk about the romance as much as Snow White's like, you know, I'm here someday, my prince will come, and then like not trying to die. You know, it's like
yeah.
literally everything's out to kill her in that movie. It's like, good lord, she's a child, chill out. So I
Okay,
think it's yeah,
yeah, that's a very good point because I mean, yes, which is another thing we're going to talk about, like the idea of first you've got this prince who, just kind of comes in, comes out. He doesn't really have a character arc in himself.
he's
We
got
don't
his
know
little
if
blush lipstick and has a machine gun vibrato like Snow White.
exactly. He's got a soft chin. Like we don't know much about him and we don't even know if he's worth Snow White's time. He
Yeah,
could be the absolute worst, but she decides she wants to marry him, so we're for it. And then with like Snow White, we which we'll get into this idea of basically adventure versus not adventure in these princess movies and how that comes off and how that like makes the women appear. because
Yeah.
she's not Moana, she's not Elsa with these, girl boss powers and going out on an adventure. But she, as you're saying, she has a lot of danger thrown at her. And the best, like, she's walking through the forest, and this huntsman comes up behind her, and he's like, yo, the queen wants me to kill you.
Very
And
good. Yeah, the queen wants your heart in a box.
yeah, and she's like, oh my God, that is so dark. You hear that when you're 14 years old. And what she does is she runs to the forest. She literally,
What else can she do? Yeah, literally. It's
what
like
else
you're
can
being
she
chased
do?
by a huntsman. You're being hunted. It's like,
Yeah, and maybe like if it was today, then she would have, taken the queen down and gotten her own sword, because that's kind of the modern day, like, Snow White movies. But like, you know, I think that I would do the same thing. I think I'd run away because, especially with the queen who like has guards, like maybe the smartest thing isn't to fight. Maybe the smartest thing is to ensure your safety. And certainly I watched Snow White like over the summer, I think in July. And especially like having just experienced COVID for a year and a half, it really resonated with me. The idea that like sometimes things just happen to you.
yeah.
Sometimes life just comes at you, and you you just have to like run, or you just have to try to survive. And sometimes is the time to, you know, board your boat and travel to the heart of Tafiti. But then sometimes you gotta like
Clean the
find,
house.
yeah, you gotta find the cottage, you gotta clean the house, and you gotta close the doors and hope the witch doesn't come.
Well, what's interesting too is, especially with the old, with I call them the big three: Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora. Like
Yeah,
the oldies. It's like they're from a modern lens, and I've always hated this. I've always hated the think pieces that are like, oh, the old princess movies are bad because they're not feminist. And I'm like,
yeah,
hold on a minute. There's like more to that. Like, yeah, they're like old and old fashioned, but like there's a difference between like a just one dimensional character and them being characters. Because the three of them, honestly, if we get to
yeah,
Aurora, she is like the most like cardboard cutout. Like she's a plot device. But like
yeah,
with Cinderella and Snow White, like they're characters, and there's people that knock on them, but it's like, yeah, they're like feminine characters, but what's wrong with that? Like they
yeah,
can be kind and like sweet and like a little more passive, but it's like they don't have to be hashtag girl boss all the time. It's like
yeah,
they can be female characters, and maybe we'll touch on that a little later. But that was something, especially with the older princesses, you can notice, and like with Snow White, like what you were saying, it's the and with Snow White, like what you were saying, it's the sort of, she's a child, and you can only do so much in that situation, and her character is like very resilient in that way of, still being very positive and very kind, and um excuse me, in the face of all this pretty traumatic stuff, and with her interactions with the dwarves, and also side note with Grumpy being like kind of a misogynist through that whole movie, where he's
yeah,
like, you're a woman. It's like, okay. But
yeah.
yeah, and that
That's
movie really
taken
works on like a
down.
heightened. Oh, sorry, what?
Yeah, I was just saying she really did shut down Grumpy for his like blatant misogyny.
Yeah, it's funny to look back and then they're like, oh, okay. But that movie really is like a masterclass in emotion-based storytelling. In
Yeah,
that it's like the logic really isn't there, but it doesn't need to be because it's all about like, oh yay, she got the prince. Oh my goodness. And it's like, oh, this is so
yeah,
scary. And it's that pure like fairy tale emotion, which is why, at least for me, it's the movie still works and isn't like you can always like watch it with like as a drinking game with like, ah yeah, it stays a kid and that. But it still works as a movie, and I think that also extends to like Cinderella as well and
yeah.
Aurora's movies.
And certainly with those earlier movies, you touched on it, the idea of living with kindness and compassion was the big takeaway from these movies, from the early three movies. And it wasn't until, and in the Renaissance and in these new Disney princess movies, there's the idea of follow your passions, stand up for yourself, fight for what you believe in, which,
And that's great.
yeah, is all valid and is great. But the idea of kindness and living with compassion, I think it's implied. I think it's part of it. And
Yeah.
these people are kind and compassionate anyways. But but Snow White and Cinderella are just like such martyrs for kindness and compassion. And seeing people who are martyrs for kindness and compassion, just like it hits differently. It hits differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And even
Yeah.
with Cinderella, it's like she's out of the three of them, she's the most compelling and three-dimensional character, like of the characters. Hers is the most developed too, especially with her living situation. And it's like, I'm moving on to
Yeah.
Cinderella, but it's like she goes through that, literally that, even that hardship of being abused by her stepmother and family, and managing
Yeah.
to like still have her friends with the little mice, and she made herself a little dress to go out to the ball because people always forget she wanted to go to the ball as like a night out. She didn't want to go find the prince. She was like, I just want to go to the ball. It sounds fun. Wear my dress, have a good time. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. And because people kind of diminish Cinderella as, oh, she, she was doing nothing and then a fairy godmother showed up. And that
Yeah.
fairy godmother like punchline is used in TV shows and movies today of, oh, we don't all get the fairy godmother like Cinderella does. But
Yeah.
it's like, it's not even that like the reason it's that she has the fairy godmother there is because like her life, she's in like she's disabled by the people around her. She is
She's a
in,
prisoner in the house, literally. She
yeah,
can't leave. She's trapped in the tower and like is like forced into slavery pretty much.
yeah, she's in like an emotionally and mentally abusive position. She's not surrounded by people who love her. She
Only the little
finds
mice.
she finds love and support and friendship through mice, which
Yeah,
is so sad.
yeah.
You need people.
And
And so,
again, yeah.
yeah, and so she represents a lot of people who I'm sure feel like stuck in those situations and feel stuck in a sense of loneliness and aren't able to help themselves. Kind of like
Yeah.
to like thinking about the Bible, not to like make this biblical, but like what Jesus said about like the meek shall inherit the earth. That's
Yeah.
that's kind of why that's how I see Cinderella. And that's why I think a lot of people see her, eventual happiness and marriage to the prince and everything as justified. And even if you don't believe in that, it's karmic.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and again, what I was saying about like the emotional level of those earlier movies, it's
Yeah.
so satisfying when she finally
Yeah.
gets what she wants in the end because you're rooting for her the whole time. And like and like we were saying earlier with the fairy godmother, like her lowest point, like people forget this, especially if you rewatch the movie, the Disney version at least.
Yeah.
But the prior scene to that is her coming downstairs with her cute little pink dress, and she's like, "Oh, stepmother, I'm ready to go to the ball." And then she's like,
Yeah.
"Okay," and it's like shot like a violent abuse, where like the stepsisters and the stepmother rip her dress to pieces, and like she's literally left in a cloth rag, and she goes sobbing into the garden because her hard work. That no, she actually no, she didn't make it because she saved the mice, and then the mice made it for her as a present. And she's like, wait, I didn't
Yeah.
have time to finish the dress. Thank you so much. And then she was super happy to go, and then they literally trashed it, and she's like sobbing, and that's like her lowest point in the entire narrative.
Yeah.
Um, and then the fairy godmother comes up as like that one beacon of hope, to pull her out of this and be like, hey, you've been so resilient through your life. I think it's time for you to. It's like she isn't like the fairy godmother isn't a logical like thing as like, oh, she like she didn't just like save her out of nowhere. She's sort of like, I think that the fairy godmother in Cinderella represents a turning point in not just life, but also sort of an abusive relationship like what Cinderella's in. Where
Mhm.
It's it's a moment of like I said, hope and transformation. Literally,
Yeah.
a movie where she gets that awesome white dress. It's white or silver. It's not blue, but she's able to get that from the fairy godmother due to her resilience and um, honestly just coping with all the trauma that she's faced. But at least for me, I think that out of the three of them, like Cinderella is one of my favorites out of those. And I mean, there's a Cinderella movie every damn 3 years, so it's like clearly it resonates.
Speaking of which, I saw Camila Cabello when I went out to brunch 2 weeks ago.
Oh, like her? I thought you meant the movie.
Oh no, no, not the movie. I saw like
Oh,
Camila
her.
Cabello, the person.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I did not go up to her though because
Nice.
I don't know, but
I
yeah,
don't know who
funny.
she is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, all I know is Senorita.
Yeah, in that bad Cinderella movie.
Yeah. So let's move on to Sleeping Beauty. Still
Ah,
part of the beginning three. This time it's interesting because the prince is his name is Prince Philip. He's like a lot more involved. He has a character arc in himself and he like has his own sense of like growth and goals.
yeah, and like I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about Snow White, but and to be honest with you, honestly, Aurora is like the most one-dimensional out of every single princess we've had, just because honestly, and this is not like her as a character, but the movie technically isn't even about her. It's like she's
Ooh.
just the plot device because it's like she's born, and then it's about the fairies trying to hide her and Maleficent being salty that she didn't get invited to a party, and then the prince has to rescue her. So it's not even really about her, which makes me like less like Gur Cinderella or no, sorry, Gur Sleeping Beauty, but it's like that's not even what the movie's about. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. And like she doesn't that kind of explains how like Prince Philip then is so vocal during the movie because he has to be. And because if she's not because then if it's not about her, then it's the literally the Maleficent and Three Fairies movie. And so
Yeah,
by having more Prince Philip in it, it's forcing you to focus on the romance since she's sleeping for like a third of the movie.
yeah. You can't call it Sleeping Beauty without Sleeping Beauty. Beauty being asleep. So
Yeah. Though I will say, like with Prince Philip, and we'll see this more with the next princes because he speaks more, the romance is more earned. Whereas like Prince Florian, who knows if he's even a good person? Who
Pretty
knows if
boy.
he's going to be a good husband? You know? I
Yeah.
mean, not even Pretty Boy. He's literally like, I don't think he's even animated with a nose.
He's a man
Like
with a child.
he's just a blob. He could have a child. He's 31. We don't
Who
know his
knows?
kingdom. We don't know his prospects.
Is Cinderella's Prince? Is he just Prince Charming?
He is just Prince Charming.
Also, him and Cinderella 3 is iconic. I just
Oh
want
my
to
god,
throw that
him.
out there.
Oh my god, that's what I was just thinking because with Prince Charming in the Cinderella movie, I think he only has one line, which is "Wait, where are you going?"
Where are you going?
And then he like yeah, like you barely even see his full face. You don't know anything about him.
Eons.
His name is even Prince Charming, which is like so bland and so clearly like villain. So you don't know anything about him. But then they made the Cinderella 3 movie in which he is thoughtful, funny, rebellious against his father, sarcastic, jumps out the window for no reason.
He's in
It's
love with
phenomenal.
Cinderella.
He's in love with Cinderella, but granted, that character development came decades later.
Yeah, 2007, I think. From what,
Yeah,
1950?
from the 1950s. And
Yeah,
so the
Prince
next
Philip is definitely like a lot more interesting out of the three of them. At least just
Yeah.
because we spend more time with him in the movie, and he's like, he likes his horse, and he's just like a guy.
He's a dude. He's a straight man. Like,
He's just a prince boy.
so next you've got the Renaissance. You've got the Little Mermaid. And this is where it starts to shift into more adventures. And the morals start to become about standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
And with Ariel, it's the idea is that Ariel loses her voice. She has to trade it away. And that's valuable. A woman's voice is valuable. And so her voice was taken away. And so her power was diminished. And so by the end of the movie, she gets her voice back and she gets, therefore, her power back. And so it's interesting that they have this message. And even though technically Ariel has minimal lines, but that ends up being effective in making the point about her
Yeah.
power.
And there's an interesting read sort of related to that. I have this read of Little Mermaid that I've read. Let me rephrase this. I have a view of Little Mermaid that I've read from different areas that I kind of agree with when it comes to Ariel as a character. Because at least for the movie, for me, like, and again, with the whole like weird Disney princess shaming culture that there is,
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, no, Ariel just wanted to be on land for a dude. It's like, okay,
yeah,
hold up. For the listeners at home, let's clarify. If you haven't seen Little Mermaid in a long time, here's your plot synopsis or
yeah.
your vibe check.
He likes
Ariel
moving items first.
Ariel is a nerd. She was a human toolbox nerd and had her little hidey hole of just garbage. And that's why she thinks part of your world. She's like, oh, I want to do that. My dad doesn't get me and like my weird niche hobby. So
You
it's
don't
like
get
that.
that.
Yeah, come on, dad, you don't get me. So that's sort of her thing. And Prince Eric is her inciting incident to be like, okay, now I really want to go up here. Like now I'm gonna like go for it. But it's like that was her sort of motivation into just getting her up there. So I wanted to clarify that. So get your facts right, people. Watch the damn movie.
Yes, good point for that. And because certainly talking about Prince Eric, I I think he is the first himbo prince we see here.
True. Yes.
Yes, for the listeners who don't know what himbo is a combination of the words he and bimbo to basically suggest a man who is very attractive and very kind, but not necessarily the smartest. And
Yeah.
that's not even
Very.
to say that Prince Eric isn't the smartest, but I mean, I don't know. He was kind of under the spell of Vanessa, the seer,
Yeah.
aka Ursula, and
There's levels to intelligence, I'll say, because like Kristoff's a
exactly.
himbo, but he's not like stupid.
No, Kristoff is smart.
That's what I heard. I read that somewhere. I was like, oh, okay.
I think
Anyways,
Kristoff's
yeah,
too smart to be a himbo. There's like,
fair.
and of course there's levels of smartness or intelligence, and there's levels of himbo, and because himbo is like, on one at some point it's its own thing. Like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove is the himbo.
Use the
He
himbo to end all himbos.
he is the himbo to end all himbos. He's the himbo king.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with Prince Eric being said himbo, we have like Disney learned its lesson from Prince Philip. They're like, okay, when we have the male love interest on the screen more, then the romance is more played off, or it's well paid off, and we think that the prince is well worth the princess's time. Because obviously, sure, if the princess likes the prince, then like, yay, she likes him, and they get married, which is what she wants, whatever. But like, we want men of quality in our movies.
Yeah, and it's like interesting too, because if you go back to like Ariel and the voice thing, she loses her voice. Or no, let me rephrase this. When she rescues Eric from the shipwreck, he only knows her for the voice, right? And that's
Yeah.
where he's like, I gotta find the girl with the voice. I just, oh, wow, wow, wow. And he's obsessed with the voice.
Mhm.
Ursula takes the voice away, and now Ariel's like, oh, it's just me. And then what's interesting too is that and this is a read that I saw somewhere that I kind of think is fascinating. It makes you buy their love story a little bit more. And people rag on the like married someone you just met, or like it was 3 days long. But
Yeah.
and again, that's I take leeway with that because again, it's like fantasy. Like mermaids aren't real. Actually,
Yeah.
maybe, but but like I can kind of buy the romance even more between Eric and Ariel because he's out here looking for the voice, but then he's starting to fall in love with Ariel just kind of as a person. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And that's a different read, especially
Like
because
he
he's
already
released.
had his own like obsession, his own direction,
Because
but
he was
she was
obsessed with the voice.
yeah. But
He's
she was
obsessed with the
such a big
voice.
person that he was drawn away from questing for the voice.
Exactly, obsessed with the voice, but falls in love with the person, which
Yeah.
is sort of like a lovely dichotomy. And I think it's subtle, but a lot of people don't read it. Like a lot of people don't discuss it like that, which is kind of like it's like, oh well, it's like there's substance here, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Most people discuss it of OMG, he fell in love with her when he didn't even hear her
And she
speak.
was
So
silent. It's like,
he
ugh.
fell in love with her because she was pretty and she never criticized him.
It's like, wait, that's not what the
Which,
movie is about.
yes, there's something to that, but you're right, that's not what the movie's about.
Yeah, it's like you gotta if you're gonna critique something, at least know what you're critiquing. And I'll get into that about Beauty and the Beast because, good lord, I
Well,
have thoughts about that.
that's the next movie. We've got Beauty and the Beast.
Oh my god, it is not
What
a
are your
Stockholm Syndrome movie. It is not about Stockholm Syndrome. That is not what it's about, people.
thoughts?
Oh dear God. What are your thoughts, Sarah?
That's another one where okay, I love Beauty and the Beast. I love, 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 love Beauty and the Beast. Same, boat as you. It's an epic. It was nominated for Best Picture.
Hmm?
It was like at the Academy Awards, Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Picture. That's where like they put the stuff like Spotlight and Forrest Gump and The Godfather. The Academy Awards put Beauty and the Beast up there. And then like a couple years later they changed it so that Best Animated Picture was its own category. But like Beauty and the Beast is really good, and at the Tribeca Film Festival they didn't show all of Beauty and the Beast. They just did like a rough cut
And it was
with
still like
like
drawings, like
yeah,
the rough drawings.
yeah, they showed like a cut of the rough drawings, and there was like complete as soon as it ended, the person who was there, the Disney exec who was there said there was like complete silence for a moment and then an eruption of applause and people standing up and applauding for 3 minutes straight and asking
Yeah.
them to put it on again, and that wasn't even like the full movie. It's an amazing movie. I think that growing up as a brunette girl who my parents told me I was smart. I mean, whether or not I was smart, they still conditioned me to be like, you're smart. You're a smart person. Okay, Sarah? Be smart. Be in school. Do well in school. Ooh, and like trying
Ooh.
to hypnotize me into being a good student, which kind of worked. But so seeing Belle then, who was a brunette reading books, really, really validated me.
I love that. Oh, I love that for you, Sarah. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yes,
and you get the criticism a lot with Belle. Sort of in a similar vein to Ariel, and also I didn't touch on this for Ariel, but like Ariel's also 16. Like she's a teenager. I love her line
yeah,
of "I'm 16 years old, Daddy. I'm not a child anymore." Girl, shut up. You are.
yeah.
I just wanted to point that
Whereas
out.
I'm like turning 21 in a month, and I'm like, I'm a baby.
Yeah, it's like Ariel, chill out. Anyways, but back to Belle. There's the criticism with Belle that's like I'm gonna touch on the Stockholm syndrome thing later because it's not Stockholm syndrome. But as her character, it's like she's kind of the hashtag quirky girl, one of the originals, which like
Yeah,
I disagree with. I think I disagree with that.
she's not like other girls.
She reads books.
I did read an interesting article the other day about this notion that Disney princesses are quote unquote not like other girls. That it isn't just like the idea that like obviously Disney preaches individualism, which is good because you should stand up for yourself and do what you want to do and not be pressured. But with girls specifically, especially since the patriarchy is always trying to pit us against each other and always trying to say, "Oh, all these other girls are like fake pretty with their makeup, but I'm real pretty." And all of these girls are like dumb because girls are dumb, but I'm a smart girl.
Oh,
And
Lord.
so is it, you know, and it's not necessarily that like Disney is preaching the not all girls and I'm not like other girls idea, but could some people see this and kind of just keep going in that direction?
Well, that's where at least, and this is just my opinion, but that's where I see with the criticism that comes from. I see it less as the movie making that distinction and people putting that criticism onto the movie based on like
Mm.
societal expectations and whatnot. Because like at least for me, and this is just my opinion as a guy, it's like Belle as a character is just like a unique individual who just happens to like be a little odd. Like she's literally she's quirky, but as like not as like the hashtag quirky girl kind of way, but like in
Yeah,
comparison to everybody, because like the town is just like they're townspeople, they're not interesting. And then Belle's like, oh yeah, I like to read, and my dad's an inventor. Cool,
yeah,
fun like that, I guess. But
yeah,
that's I can't really speak on that criticism too much because I don't really know that much
yeah.
about it. So
Well, and it is interesting how, like, not to, we are not going to talk about the reboots anymore. The reboots are not valid.
oh
We do
yeah,
not believe in
I
the live
shudder.
action reboots on this podcast.
I shudder.
Reboots do. But in the 2017 live action reboot, uh, they're they're just way they like drill the idea that Belle is a girl boss
Girl boss Belle.
through your right eyeball into your skull.
It's so obnoxious.
They like whereas in the animated movie, it's like, oh, she's a little bit odd. She doesn't fit in. She's always reading
She
her
reads.
she's always reading her books, which that doesn't necessarily mean that she's the only one who knows how to read. It could just be that she's really an introvert and really isn't good at talking to people. And she just like reads in public, which we all knew those people in
There's
elementary school.
there's a term for that. Bookworm. It's
Yeah,
like
book
common.
introvert. Whereas like everyone else is working and it's kind of like, oh, whatever. She's a little different. But then in the live action movie, they're like, how dare you read?
Teaching
What are
another girl to read isn't
you?
one enough.
She's teaching a little girl, like it's no one else in the village knows how to read.
They don't have a
And then,
library in that movie. It's a church like with like three books. It's like so
yeah.
it's such an odd choice.
And then she's teaching a little girl how to read, and all of these people come up to her like, what are you doing, witch? And then
It's
they
like, oh my
throw
god.
her laundry in the dirt.
She invents the washing machine.
Oh my
Oh
god.
Christ. It makes
God,
no sense.
it's ridiculous.
But it's like, yeah, the thing with Belle too is that and again, I was saying this earlier, but one of her journey as a character is really interesting to me, at least. And it's one of my favorites of the Disney princesses, only because she starts off in that place of like kind of in her own space, very much reserved, except with her
Yeah,
father, who she's super close to, um, and yearning for more. Obviously, I want adventure in the Great White somewhere.
yeah,
Um, and I always see that I want song as just something not necessarily like going out into the world, but like something wild, something adventurous, something bigger than herself. And I didn't realize the pun there, but I didn't realize the intention there. But I was like, oh, she is getting something wild and bigger than herself. It's the beast. But uh, it's there's that journey that happens where she literally gets kidnapped by a monster.
Yeah.
Um, but then the beast is going through his own little journey, which also, if you want to go back to the prince's angle, he's
Yeah.
like the best character as
Yeah.
well, along with Belle. He's like they're both the heart of the movie. Well, Belle's the heart
Yeah.
of the movie, but the beast is like another amazing character.
Yeah. And he plays a big part, and the romance is earned. And he's not a himbo like Eric, but unlike Sleeping Beauty, Belle is still very much the lead and very much in control of her story.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, and another thing with what gets me about Girl Boss Belle is that, and what gets me a lot with those movies, it's like you don't have to girl boss the princesses because they already were girl bosses, and it's like
Yeah.
just because they're not running a company doesn't mean they're not like super cool and like worthy of looking up to, and like it's like they
Yeah.
have their strengths in places, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, like, with new movies, and we'll get to it, they try to define what being a girl boss is. But
yeah, which
anyway,
yeah,
after Belle is Jasmine. And the interesting thing about Jasmine is that actually the movie she's in is named Aladdin.
yeah,
And so she is a Disney princess, and she is obviously like the main female character in her movie, but like Aladdin is the main character, and
yeah.
so yeah,
And that's always interesting to me too, and especially like I'm gonna talk about this angle really quick, but especially with her being the first non-white Disney princess, it's like,
uh,
sexualized, woof. Um,
mm,
which I will say the remake did fix. Actually, didn't let me not give the remake credit. They didn't fix Jack, but it like at least wasn't as like oddly sexual with Jasmine and her being like
yeah.
16. So that's the one thing that rubs me wrong with the original movie as much as I
Oh,
love it.
you're so right. I wasn't, because I was thinking like, oh, it's interesting that like Aladdin's in the main character, and does that diminish Jasmine's role within her own movie then? Whereas all of these other princesses are like front and center, and then Jasmine is to the side in her own movie. But that, like, you're right. And I was thinking originally like, oh, maybe it was like a Princess and the Frog thing where they wanted to make the main character a guy so
Well, yeah,
that,
Aladdin was marketed specifically to like boys and everything.
yeah, yeah. And so then that makes sense with it first being the first Disney princess of color. She's the first Disney princess of color, and she wasn't even the main character. And then
Yeah.
she had that, super sexy outfit
Your
with
beard is so twisted. It's like, okay.
uh,
I hate it. I hate
that
it.
scene made me like bleh, when I was
It's
a
like
little.
gross. But even in Jasmine, but like Anna Jasmine as a character herself,
Yeah.
she's a cool character. She's very like 90s feminism where it's like I can jump over the building myself. But like
Yes.
she's not really like a bad character, I would say. And kind of, and again, because she's so sidelined as like, because it's like the movie's about Aladdin, but it's like
Yeah.
there's definitely more you can do with her, which like the remake does, and she's like, oh, I want to be a girl boss politician now, but um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have too much to say about Jasmine, unfortunately, because like, I mean, I like the musicals version of her a little bit too, but it's not too different from the movie. So,
Yeah. And then next you have Pocahontas,
Lord
which,
Almighty,
yeah, it's
there's a
so
lot
hard.
there.
There's so much there.
So
And
that's an whole podcast episode in itself.
yeah, we don't have time to get into, the
How problematic that entire movie is.
everything. The
Fake,
stereotypes that
yeah,
have emerged from it, the
fake
stereo.
Barbie surfer model Pocahontas. It's like what?
Yeah, yeah. We should note though, John Smith and Pocahontas were not a couple in real life.
He was
In
like 12.
Yeah, she was like in middle school when she met. Well, I mean, she wasn't in middle school. That's, a
She was that
different
age, though.
concept. But yeah, she was middle school aged. And John Smith was like an adult.
He was like
And
45 and a beard.
so the actual story of Pocahontas is that she was captured and held for ransoms by the colonists. Obviously, she was the daughter of the Powhatan chief. Her real name was Amonute, later known as Matoaka.
Mm.
Interesting. Uh, but so she was like held for ransom. And then during her captivity, she was encouraged to convert and then baptized under the name Rebecca, and then was married to tobacco planter John Rolfe. And then she was taken to London, and everyone was like, "Oh, look at her! She's quote unquote civilized savage."
Ugh.
And of course, don't use that word uh, in describing anyone, but certainly not in describing indigenous people. So Disney does not share that story. Disney
Yeah.
shares something, very made up and very romanticized. And it did not do as well as the box office, but that's because it was competing with Lion King.
Yeah.
Lion King was the big thing, and Lion King deserves all its praise. It's Lion King. But
Yeah.
like Pocahontas, I can't even separate the story from the the misrepresentation and the historical inaccuracies to be able to say whether or not the movie was, effective, and whether or not John Smith was a good love interest for her, and if that did anything for her character. Like, I just can't I can't say.
Yeah, and it's like, the movie's the movie itself is very, like, oh my God, both sides are bad to colonization, which that's a whole other topic, but um,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like,
like, no, no,
there's a
no.
whole host of problems that lead to how the portrayal of Pocahontas as a character just kind of doesn't work, despite having like a great singing voice and um, some beautiful animation. It's just like it falls flat, and we can't even really talk about Pocahontas as a character because it's just like she's just every single native indigenous woman stereotype known to man. It's like
Yeah,
I speak with nature and I touch rocks and I can talk to the white man and I'll save my family. It's like okay,
yeah.
she's not really a
I
character.
Yeah, she's, sexualized, and then she talks to the raccoons, and she talks to her grandma in the trees, and then she jumps over waterfalls, and then she doesn't want to marry the Native American man in her tribe. She wants to marry the white man because he seems cool.
Adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even talk about it as like a character. It's just hard to. But so moving on to Mulan.
Oh, what a
Mulan,
queen.
I love Mulan. I love Mulan. And Li Shang is, talking about talking about Disney princes, sorry, and talking about, action and how that empowers. It's all it's all there in the best way for Mulan. She
Yeah.
is a warrior, but she's not just like a warrior for no reason. It's not an action movie in like a Mad Max Jason Bourne way. Oh, we're having action because it's for the sake of action. It's girl boss to have action. She is a warrior because she is trying to save her father's life. And
Yeah.
she is dressing up as a man, and she is in danger. And if people discover her gender, she can be killed. And she becomes the best warrior, not because she's the protagonist. She struggles. She has to work hard. or else she's gonna get sent home. So she works hard and like earns her spot there, and she earns trust with Shang. And Shang is,
Yeah.
this really great character who, I mean, obviously, first as soon as he realizes she's a woman, he of course is filled with prejudice. Uh, but he overcomes that.
Yeah, and honestly, like what I was saying about Belle and her journey, I
Yeah.
like what is it? I like expand five times from Mulan. Her journey is I want to say my favorite one, because
Hmm.
of what she does, and because again, like she's a normal person who is
Yeah.
thrown into these extraneous given circumstances of trying
Yeah.
to fight, like trying to honor both her family, but also trying to save her father because he's like ill, and that in that again, like what you said, the struggle but the ultimate success of her like developing as a warrior is so rewarding in like a
Yes.
film sense. And honestly, what makes her character even more, you want to root for her so badly as well, especially in like the make a man out of you montage where she finally gets up to the top of that pole. It's like, yeah, Mulan, let's go. Um, yeah,
Uh,
she's a great character, amazing character.
yeah, and because it has it has every element. It has she is it has the issues of she is put in her situation by whatever forces it is, in the same way with like Snow White and Cinderella. But for Mulan, it's the fact that her father is recruited by the army because China's at
Yep.
war, but he is an elderly man. And then because she is a like woman, she can't be the son and fight on behalf of her father. So she has to stand out from the crowd like Belle, like Pocahontas, and she has to make this choice to cut her hair and pretend to be a man. And then she does the Moana, Merida, Raya action thing, and she is a warrior.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the I love the newer movies, I think they're still trying to replicate that sort of lightning strike they got with Mulan in terms of like the beautiful marriage between like what is it? Like the hero's journey with sort of that lovely touch of female empowerment that is awesome. And there's so much joy to talk about with Mulan. She's great.
Yeah, I love Mulan. And so then she was the last Disney Renaissance princess. And then, over a decade later is when you get Tiana. And Tiana is, I love Princess and the Frog. We've already said she's awesome. And what's cool about her is that she is a businesswoman. She runs her own business. And that's kind of how she's empowered in this film. And Prince Naveen, he's, a wealthy playboy. He's no good, but she helps him become a better person. And so he has a very well developed story arc, and their love story is paid off.
Yeah, no, again, this is similar with Mulan with like Tiana. It's like again, they're characters. They're fleshed out characters now, which I think is awesome.
Hmm.
And I also love Tiana's journey too, with that
Yeah.
sort of it's not like how do I explain this? It's not an alteration of her dream, but it's sort of like a shift in perspective because I know her thing is always like working hard to get my restaurant and like live up to my dad's dreams. And
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
ultimately learned. I love her journey of like learning to like it's okay to have some time for yourself, and like
Yeah.
what do you want? It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and especially living in like our capitalist world where we're told that we have to monetize everything we do, and everything we do has to be turned into like an opportunity to make money or to use it for your career. But it points out, but the whole point of Tiana and why she wants a restaurant is not for the money, is not for the status. I mean, obviously, there is a big focus on that, the fact that she has to earn the money to
Yeah.
open it, that it takes money, it takes time, and she is discriminated against uh, blatantly for her gender and a little more subtly for her race. I mean, when you're a child, you don't realize it, but when you're an adult, it's obvious. There's the line where she has enough money to finally pay for the location, but the brokers decide to give it to someone else, and she's like, "What? I got there first." And he said, "Oh, for a woman of your background, you're better off with your act," which you now realize it's about race. And so
Yeah,
obviously,
the little tiptoe there with it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so you see just kind of like how much, like how many layer, like not like she's already doing like all of this physical work to own property from waitressing jobs, but then she has to like be emotionally strong against this discrimination. But like even through all that, she doesn't do she doesn't try to get the restaurant for the sake of having that restaurant and earning money. She does it because cooking was a joy with her father.
Yeah, it's like a
And
passion and a one and like
yeah,
a connection.
yeah, and it goes back to the heart and the soul. And the idea is if you're working so hard and you're working day and night for these ideas, but you're not even, but you've lost the heart and soul, or you don't take the time to be with your family and be with the people you love, then yeah.
Yeah, and again, great movie. It's like
Yeah.
there's so much there, and especially like with Tiana too being the first black princess, it's like it's super cool to see that and get that again representation is super important. And
Yeah.
yeah, well, let's see more. Let's stop with just Tiana. Let's see more.
Yeah. It's just a straight up fun movie. Every
Yeah.
song is a banger. Every song is absolute, fire. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And it's the last 2D, and I miss that style a lot. I'm hoping they
Yeah,
bring it back.
I do too. But that is a good segue into our first CGI princess, Rapunzel,
Ooh.
which, I think I think that she has a good balance of, she was in her tower, literally. She she was dealt the guards she was dealt, which wasn't very good. But Eugene Flynn Rider is honestly a fairy godmother in himself. As in, he in this movie, he is the Deus ex machina
Machina, yeah.
that takes her on the adventure, and she's excited to go on the adventure. And he has a full character arc, and she is, I think she has a great adventure there within, good bounds.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then like with Rapunzel, it's kind of I wouldn't say return to form because it's another fairy tale, European fairy tale with like
Mhm.
princess trapped in the tower, et cetera, very similar to the old movies. But
Mhm.
and especially with her being like she was what, like 18 or
Yeah,
17.
I think so. Yeah.
There's she's 18 I think in that movie. There's an
Mhm.
interesting thing they do for that one where it's a lot more focus on how it affects her as a character, and especially with Gothel being like literally the textbook definition of an emotionally abusive parent. It's like
Yeah.
the movie gets to play around with how like traumatizing and actually genuinely sad it is because that movie is very sad, despite it
Yeah, and
being like
especially
with
the
all those
scene where
cute songs and everything.
yeah, and especially the scene where she chains up Rapunzel, like, that's dark.
Yeah. So Rapunzel gets to go on that wonderful journey too, just with like a self discovery journey and knowing her own worth as a human despite being locked up for a while, and it's great to see. And she's like her connection with Flynn Rider is also really that growth there is really sweet to watch.
Yeah, yeah. So, next we get Merida, and Merida was I'm not divisive, but, when Brave came out, it was taken very politically because she had no prince.
Gasp!
I mean, there were 3 princes who were vying after her. One of them, I think it's Lord, let me look it up. Brave suitors. One of them looks like Adam Driver, and I
Oh
just,
yeah,
the one with like the long, young Macintosh
yeah.
with like the big nose and the long black hair. Mwah. but but she didn't choose any of these princes, and she had no love interest. And I remember some people being upset because, of course, romance and marriage at the end is part of the formula, and or part of the Disney princess formula. And
Yeah.
of course, I think at the time I embraced it, and I was like, yeah, good for Disney. Princesses can exist without like falling in love in the end. They don't need romance, and they don't need a prince to make their like themselves happy to make the movie good, which is true. They don't. But I think that after having sat with Brave for like around like 7-8 years, I now feel like it's not that feminist to not have a prince. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it comes down to, and Brave isn't my favorite movie, I'll be honest, and Merida's character isn't my favorite either, but I respect the movie enough to be it like I respect the movie in that she herself has her own character and her own journey, and you at least have to have one of those establishing the fact that it's like, hey, we're changing it up here, and that's super important, and it's
Yeah.
led to such better. It sounds so condescending, but it's led to such better movies with like that same intention, but they still work as like characters that aren't really like stock. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, they had to have like one movie. There had to be a movie to break out of the pattern,
Yeah,
and Brave was it.
and it's
And
funny because Brave is a Pixar movie too.
yeah, yeah. And I think the unfortunate thing for Brave is that also Brave isn't a musical. So
Yeah,
it doesn't have that kind of thing making it more popular, just making it straight up. Musicals are just more fun. Disney musicals, especially the princess movies, they're just more fun.
yeah,
So it didn't have that to bolster it. And then whereas like future Disney princesses like don't feel any kind of deficit without a Disney prince. It's like, oh, does there need to be a guy here? I don't know. We have a pretty good cast of characters. We don't need to add a love interest. But for Merida, she is like actively trying to throw away her suitors.
yeah.
Yeah. So next we got Moana. Well,
Oh,
no, no, no. First we got Elsa and Anna,
oh yeah.
which is obviously they're their own franchise. And then we have 2 princesses in one movie. And so then I remember with that one, Anna has Kristoff, and Elsa did not have a prince. And so people had 2 instincts. The 2 instincts were to either say, what if Hans and Elsa got together? But like, bro, we established Hans as the villain. Like, just because there is a free young man does not mean he has to pair up with Elsa. And then the other thing is that people were saying, oh, maybe she's a lesbian, which maybe she is. And obviously they, say, maybe Elsa does have a girlfriend in Frozen 2. But like still people see a single woman and they try to find a romantic.
Justification.
Yeah.
Yeah, the justification for a romance, which is like maybe it's expected in Disney movies, but it's like also you don't need it as long as you write a good movie.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even that there's anything bad about the romances. Like we
Exactly. I don't see
a
nothing wrong with
million
romance.
great movies beforehand with romances that were great movies, but obviously uh the romances don't make the movies the way the protagonists do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got Moana. Once again, no
Yes.
unless, some people say Maui, but I think that is
Yeah.
completely right. He is
No, no,
thousands
no.
of years older than her. So, and he is a demigod, so no.
They're like
Uh,
they got like a friend, like a like buddy cop vibe going on. So like,
yes, yes, very well said. Very well said. And she is a big adventure princess. And honestly, let's like Moana is so much better than Raya. But like
yeah, I
let's
agree.
for the sake of discussing them, let's like talk about Moana and Raya in the sense that they are like pure action adventure princesses.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too, especially with what you said, action adventure. Because like, I guess I can start out talking about Moana because Moana is very. I that was my one of my favorite movies of recent years.
Mhm.
Recent being like that movie came out in 2016, and that was
Yeah.
the last Disney movie I genuinely really liked. Which I don't know is saying
Yeah.
something, but and again, it was a musical, so I'm excited for the next. I'm excited for Encanto, but
Mhm.
that movie I think really works with Moana's character. I think Moana's character is super um just it's super cool. It's like she does a lot of awesome stuff, and they do say the like the hashtag wink to the audience we're woke lines in there, which are
Yeah.
annoying. But even then, it's like I'm still like invested in Moana's journey and like what she has to do, and like God, I love her relationship with her grandma and that movie. I just love that movie. I might watch it
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah, I think that like with you're right in that they throw in the like wink wink we're woke lines, but the story is so well developed. Whereas with Raya, they don't she doesn't throw in the we're woke lines, but Aquafina's character sometimes does, I feel like. Uh
Yeah, I
and
liked the
then
Raya
also
movie. Okay,
yeah.
like yeah, I was like I thought it was fine. I was just
Mhm.
like I got didn't really get invested in Raya's personal journey because she kind of didn't
Yeah.
really. There was a weird trust thing going on, but then like it didn't really resolve. I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's a flawed movie. I watched it
yeah,
and I can't even point out what's wrong with it. Like there just seems to be a lot of mistakes made early on
yeah,
that and they all just kind of compounded on each other.
yeah.
So, this is where we get to the next segment of the podcast. It is called Convince Chad. Imagine this, D'Angelo. You're
Okay.
at a football game. You're with your clarinet. You just
Yeah.
did your field show for halftime and you're walking off and you're passing by the football team. They're coming out to play and you pass by these two players talking to each other and one of them is like, "Bro, Disney princesses are so stupid. Like the movies aren't even worth it and they're only for little girls." And you are enraged and you hit them on the head with your clarinet. And you're like, "Stop right there, sir." And everyone on the field and in the stadium stops and is like, "Oh my God, this clarinet just assaulted this football player." And
Oof.
now, in Chad's language, you must explain why Disney princesses are worth more than they believe. Convince Chad.
Ooh. Good Lord. That's heavy. Well, Here's the deal, folks. You know, you ever felt like an outsider? You ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere, or that something was meant, you were meant for something more? Well, the journeys of these characters can take you there, and there's so much you can learn from them. And you know, what's wrong if it's for girls, huh? There's nothing wrong with that. So why don't you just stop being a little stupid person? Uh, you can relate to it. I'm sure you can. There's so much there for everybody. You know what? Think about it. You definitely watched it as a child. Don't kid yourself around. You did. And if you're just lying to yourself, so open up your minds and your hearts a little bit, and it saves you some of the stress of picking on someone else about it. Yeah.
Said D'Angelo, well said. Well, that was another very exciting episode of A Bro's Guide to Glitter. Hope to see you around.